This is what we're gonna open up with right here.
Yes.
Old fat guy squats.
You want to see what really happens behind the scenes.
Like, I tuned in and watched these guys. They were squatting with a 25-pound plate. Meanwhile, they probably just watched the CrossFit Games and saw the girls overhead lunge for like 100 yards with like 75 pounds or something crazy. Me and the Rhino got some deadlifts to do. We're getting old. He's getting fat. And we're just trying to warm up, trying to get our bodies ready. So we're doing some goblet squat type of
Like
deals.
the Tin Man without the oil can. Gotta do some. Get that taint opened up for Eddie this morning.
Hip hinging. A couple of those. A couple of squats. Somebody's watching right now. They're like, "That's not a goblet squat."
We just make shit up to see if people will do it the next day after they watch it on the internet. You ever used to do that in the gym? Go in there and do some like crazy, stupid something in the gym?
All the time.
And then the next day, you'd see people in there doing it?
Yep. Or right
Like,
behind you.
Like, who started that stupid thing? It was like Kai Green, it was doing the stupid bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, and now
You know,
everybody does it. Like it's really an exercise.
He made it up, people.
Yeah, I think he made it up.
So many people are so depressed right now. Regular bar, trap bar, what do you think?
It doesn't matter to me. I haven't pulled regular bar in a long time. I don't care. Let's give it a try.
All right, regular bar it is.
Where's Mr. Chris this morning?
He worked out early.
He did the 4 a.m. thing?
Early bird. The early bird, not so special. Plate on there.
Yes, indeed. So the guy that preaches about sleep, his flight was late. Got in at 1 o'clock in the morning. And then at 5 a.m., I think the people upstairs at the hotel got kids. They're up. Sounded like they were doing Reebok step workout. So working on 4 hours. And that's not good.
Trying to lay out the excuses beforehand.
Yeah. So if Mark beats me today, I have a handicap.
Yeah, well, he'll have no trouble beating me. There we go.
Need some chalk, just deadlift 135. I can't remember the last time I pulled. I've been squatting.
It's been,
A
Oh,
lot.
yeah, you've been squatting often, right?
Squatting a lot.
2 or 3 times a
often,
week?
Twice a week. And I haven't
Just going by
pulled.
how you feel and squatting from there, or you have a plan?
I just kind of go how I feel. I found if I squat and deadlift, that was how I got hurt last time. About a year and a half ago, I hurt my back. I was doing both. It's just too much fatigue.
Hurt your back and you pulled your hamstring not too long ago, too, right?
Yeah. It's probably why I haven't deadlifted in a while. But it seems like I can excel at one or the other, but when I combine them, even when we trained, I would squat heavy one week, deadlift heavy the next. I couldn't do both.
We stopped paying attention to your deadlift, remember?
Yeah.
Still deadlift at 837. Not bad. Well, we just knew that his grip and that his back wasn't going to give out, so we're like, let's just keep making the legs stronger.
Got to get it off the floor.
A couple cheater pulls. How do you coach the deadlift, Stan? What are you looking for people to do?
Mostly I try not to make it a pull. I want to make it a press. So I want to create a lot of good core stability. One of the things I like is what Mark Philippi did with me is once you get yourself positioned, he would come up and hit me from the sides. It would really make you start to contract and
What do you mean by a
compress.
press?
Through the floor.
Pushing into the ground?
I want it to be a standing leg press, pushing through the ground.
Right.
I don't want people pulling on that bar through the lower back. I want them pushing.
Pulling on it like this.
Yeah, I don't
Right.
want it to hit here.
As opposed
I want them to
to
be pushing, so now your glutes. Now your glutes.
Like that.
I think the deadlift should be
makes sense.
initiated with the glutes.
Right.
Is what I think. I think you got a higher top end that way. I'll do one more warm up here. I also keep the ass pretty high. I like to keep 70 degrees.
Yeah.
I don't want people sitting down too deep.
A lot of times when they sit down too deep, a lot of times their butt comes back up anyway, and then they
course.
round over, right?
Yeah, and then they lose some of that tension.
You guys know what we're talking about? Like the butt moves and the weights don't.
That's a problem.
That's not great. Get another plate on here. I think if we talk enough, they won't notice that we're not lifting anything.
Yeah.
Let's keep that momentum going. We'll get into some good stories later too, but Stan and I met, basically, he lifted at a gym called Body Tribe, which was in Sacramento, right down the street from SuperTraining Gym when we were teamed up at Midtown Strength and Conditioning. I saw his lift on YouTube, and I can't even remember how I got a hold of him. I think I sent him a message on
I
YouTube.
think some of your team was there helping with the lift,
Right.
helping with the meat spotting.
Right.
Yeah.
And I just saw this crazy guy total like 2050. And I was like,
2070.
2070.
If you had said 2090, I wouldn't have corrected you. I'd have been like,
I'm always jipping him a couple pounds. And I reached out to him. He said, yeah, next time I come down that way, I'll check out your gym. And then he was doing stuff with Flex Wheeler in San Jose. He was trying to become a pro bodybuilder, which he eventually did. And then he came, a couple weeks later, he came up to me, right?
Yep. Started lifting, getting fat. Are you up here?
Yep. I think something that's really important on that is that when Stan did bodybuilding, he hung around with bodybuilders, and he got around the best people that he could find. Flex Wheeler's pretty damn good, right? And then when it came to powerlifting, I don't know why he sought out me, but he came to SuperTraining Gym and he started training with us. So when he was bodybuilding, he's hanging out with jacked and tan, ripped people, and when he was powerlifting, he's hanging out with fat guys like myself. There we go.
The hardest part was that Mark didn't have any mirrors at his gym. So in between sets of 800-pound squats, I'd have to run into the bathroom and pull my pants down to look at my quads, just so I could see
We
them.
did have a nice bathroom, and
Yes.
the bathroom had mirrors. There you go,
Yeah,
Rhino.
for me, it's a pressing movement. I think it should be a standing leg press. A lot of glute.
A lot of times on your warm-ups, you don't stand up all the way, and you have kind of a routine that you like to do. Is there any specific reason, or just feel?
I've always been able to finish. If I can get it off the floor, I can finish.
Yeah.
And I hate, you know how I am when I warm up for lifts, I hate pre-exhausting myself.
Right.
When I'm benching, I won't do sets of 10 with the lighter weights. I'll do doubles and triples at most. So that's kind of how I climb up.
Yeah, we've seen
Twos and threes.
we've seen Michael Tren do the same thing, where he just does one rep a lot of times.
Yeah.
I always like to do sumo and conventional, and then that way when we get to heavier weight, I can kind of pick what feels good for the day. How about what Kaylor Willem's doing, huh?
I've stopped watching. If you just forget those people exist, then you still feel pretty good about yourself.
Hit the unfollow button.
Yeah, I do the mute. I don't need to see 900-pound deadlifts. Then I go out in my garage and do my little thing and feel bad about myself.
You want to take another one?
No, we can go up.
Good.
Yeah, that's the way the industry has gone. There's
Too many mutants.
yeah, they're just popping up here and there.
Remember the backyard meet of the century was kind of the start of like
Mutants.
getting together a gang of mutants.
Yeah.
That meet was deadly. Eric Willebridge and all those other guys pulling 800 pounds like it was nothing. Why do you think sometimes like taller athletes, I hear taller athletes are like, oh man, I have trouble deadlifting. And it's really not true though, right? I mean, you train some of the tallest guys, but they're also enormous, right?
Yeah,
So a tall guy can be strong on a pull, right?
sure. As long as they can maintain a neutral spine. That's really the end of the day.
Right.
And everybody's going to be different. Where their back angle is going to be their own
Right.
anthropometry. It's going to depend on their limb lengths. So if they've got long legs and a short torso, their chest's going to be staring straight at the ground.
Yeah.
And if they've got short legs and a long torso, or like Eddie with long arms and short
Might be able
legs,
to be more upright.
you'd be a little more upright. So that doesn't concern me as much as maintaining that neutral spine. But with athletes, I kind of got to err on the side of Robert Oberst on this one.
Right.
And I know it brought up a lot of controversy, but with athletes, if you're not actually deadlifting in a meet, then I might use a rack dead
Right.
or a trap bar so that they don't have to learn a new skill,
Right.
because that's not their skill.
For those people that are unaware, Robert Oberst pointed out how dangerous deadlifts are. He said he didn't even think it was a great exercise for athletes. And I really don't think when you get into the weeds and you start to look at the coaches that are around the country and even around the world, I don't think a lot of people would even debate that. I think they would say, yeah, that's actually pretty smart.
I don't think it's inherently dangerous necessarily, but it's not the best exercise for
Right.
performance for the kinds of athletes he was talking about.
Right.
Football players, basketball players. Power is more important.
Right.
Explosive speed.
Right.
So they're doing things, as you mentioned, Olympic type lifts.
Maybe variations of a deadlift, right? Maybe deadlifting against some bands with lighter weight, or an elevated deadlift, wagon
Yep.
wheels, or get up on a rack or something like that. For me, I don't know why, but I've always kind of liked this wider stance with a pull. So I end up kind of doing a conventional fat guy, Brian Shaw type of pull, except for with 700 less pounds. I think I'm just able to maybe squat it up a little bit better, get my legs under me.
It's more of a leg press.
Right.
When you're strongest on the leg press when your feet are kind of out here.
Yeah.
And so you get a lot of hips and a lot of glutes in the movement, a lot of legs. Just keep your back stable.
There we go. Another plate.
As far as the safety bit goes, lifting weights is one of the safest things. It's obviously safer than team sports. It's even safer than running in terms of injuries.
Sprinting, yeah. The amount of load on your
incurred,
body.
yeah. It's even safer than running. It's probably down there with swimming because they're controlled movements. So I'm not trying to classify it as a dangerous movement by any stretch of the imagination, but my big thing is if you're bodybuilding, probably not a great exercise.
Right.
Because frequency and volume is more important than the load. And if you're hitting your lumbar spine with a ton of stress, it may cause more delayed onset soreness. You may not recover as fast.
Right.
And then you lose the frequency.
That's a great point. So for an athlete, if an athlete is slow for 2 or 3 days, just because they deadlifted 2 or 3 days prior, that's a no-go. They can't afford that, because then they can't afford the training frequency. They can't go do their drills and other things they need to do.
Yeah, I didn't do a single squat or deadlift when I trained with Flex for bodybuilding. And then when we train heavy weights, you just have to have longer, as you progress, become intermediate and advanced, the heavier the loads are, the longer the rest periods became, or you just didn't recover.
And you came back to powerlifting, you were really strong though still.
It comes back really quickly.
Most people would be scared not to squat or pull for a while. There we go, Stan. Yeah, buddy. Yeah, my brother's been deadlifting pretty good. He
I saw.
pulled 700 with the trap bar.
Yeah.
And then he was, speaking of getting hurt, and it was even with the trap bar, which is different, but he was hurt for like for 3 or 4 weeks. His knee was bothering him, you know?
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to go for it, right? Stan and I still mess ourselves up all the time. There we go.
Yeah, I get feedback every now and then on my lifts when I'm squatting. People are like, Stan, you're setting a bad example. You're over 50.
Right.
You know, people are going to hurt themselves. But that's actually within my safety range.
Right.
You know, 600 to me is not what I used to lift.
Right.
You know, it's probably 200-300 pounds less than I used to do.
Right.
But it's a use it or lose it scenario, so long as you're responsibly progressing. If you're not loading, they think that it's degenerative. The
Right.
joints will somehow start to decay. Just the opposite happens. When you lift, you know, loads that you can manage
Right.
within a rep range that you can recover from, you actually decrease inflammation and you stimulate the joints so that they get stronger. And also with bone mineral density. Like I have my 89-year-old dad, we'll go out in the garage and I have some high pins set up in a bar. I can't wait to get Chris Duffin's open-ended
Oh yeah. His new trap bar. Yeah.
Yeah, that you can just walk into.
Yeah.
But my dad will just grab the weight and stand up with it like this. Because if you don't get axial loading, you're not getting, you know, you're not increasing your bone density.
Right.
And so that's one thing that I have to make sure and do with my pops.
Isn't a big part of this game just like figuring out how to have intense workouts and then managing your nutrition around that? So like, if you want to gain weight, then it's going to take you eating tons and tons of food. And if you want to lose weight, then you have to figure out how do I bring the calories down at a reasonable rate, but I can still get intense workouts. Like we still need good workouts, right?
Of course, yeah. But in the absence of the stimulus, you're going to get atrophy.
Right.
That's, you know, that's what happens with elderly people with sarcopenia. It's just lack of use.
So if you're cutting down, do you lift light though, or are you still
No.
trying to push? You're just trying to push what you can handle.
When
still.
you're at a calorie deficit is a time to actually increase your intensity. I just want to say intensity because the load isn't necessarily the predictor. How close you get to failure.
Right.
Whether or not you recruit those type 2X, you know, maximal muscle fiber recruitment is what matters. So you can do that at a 85% load, you can do that at a 50% load. As long as you get to within about a rep of failure, you can get maximal muscle fiber recruitment, and then they won't shrink, or should, you know, not shrink as much.
So
as
you're
they
trying
might.
to hold on to as much muscle mass as possible.
Yeah.
While in a caloric deficit.
Yeah.
So you
And-
don't shift your metabolism to slowing down.
Yeah. Well, everybody's going to have some metabolic adaptation, but yeah,
Right.
weight training is going to, you know, muscle's going to burn more fuel than anything else. But if you go to a lighter weight or less intensity, if you do 10 reps when you could have done 20,
Right.
the stimulus isn't sufficient to maintain that muscle mass, particularly to calorie deficit. And then you're going to start losing muscle, which I think is what really has been prevalent in the figure physique bikini world.
Right.
And bodybuilders too. They've historically done some high rep stuff. The smart guys don't.
You shrink
The
down
good
too
coaches know better. They keep a good load on the athletes so they don't
Another
shrink.
plate?
Yeah, we'll try one more. Here's where the bar speed starts to slow a bit.
Here's where everything starts to slow down.
I get exposed right
The rubber
here.
hits the road.
Yeah.
Oops. Now you haven't used the belt much. Is that just preference or?
I use belt on squats. On the heavier squats, I use a belt now. Probably just since I hurt my back a year and a half ago.
I never really loved it on deadlifts. Like you used to wear
No.
that spud belt, which is kind of flexible, like not real,
Up on the ribs, it really made me feel like I had
just to kind of compress
yeah,
everything in.
almost like a suit on.
I'm gonna.
You want to
grab
collar
my-
that one?
Yeah. I'm gonna grab my belt. I like to cheat. 10-minute walk. Ah, here we are. All right, here we go.
Yes, indeed.
And cheat with straps, belt, everything, hair ties. You go, Stan.
See how this feels.
Yep.
I kind of teach the starting strength method since I was at their seminar earlier this year. It's just a really simple 5-step setup process.
What do we got?
And they'll have folks set up about an inch, the shins about an inch from the bar. And then in reaching down to grab the bar, you don't want to move the bar.
That's Mark Ripito, right? Starting
Yep.
strength?
Mark Ripito teaches it this way. Once you position yourself, once you touch your shins to the bar, that's where your hips are. They're set. You don't want to move them again. After that point, you just want to
Lock in
your lower back, get the neutral spine. One other thing I like to add to it is that to create tension in the midsection, I mentioned that I would go down and grab the bar, and sometimes I'll cue people up. I'll bump them. I'll hit them from side to side just to get them to lock in their abdomen.
Because it's hard to just say get tight. You need to like kind of feel it. You need to hit people a little bit.
I want them to react.
Right.
If need be, I'll use a number of different cueing mechanisms
Like
to
if
try and get them to
take
respond.
you down, you would tense up a ton, right?
Yeah. And to create tension, you want to create tension. You know, Eddie talked about how he would wedge his knees into his
get
elbows.
in there so tight he could pick up 700
just
pounds.
Wedge everything in and get everything tight. You see, like when Larry Wheels does a lift, he'll breathe here.
Yeah, right.
And then he'll go down. This is full, he's compressing it. And when you watch Eric Lillybridge do a lift, he'll breathe.
That's where I like to breathe down there, yep.
And then he comes in and he's basically filling this with air and then compressing it, and that's where the core gets stable. I'm doing all this because I probably can't.
Trying to get
I'm
rest.
hoping, the film will run out, the battery will go dead. There'll be a mechanical error, thing will get unplugged. You watch Stan do the slowest
Internet.
500 pull in history.
Instagram gets wiped out. There we go, Stan. There we go. Smooth. Good work, Biggs. Now, here's the hardest thing to do in the gym right here. Hardest thing to do in the gym right here is to take some weight off. So I'm going to be a wimp and take some weight off. Because I haven't even pulled 500 pounds in a while. I'm sure Stan hasn't either. He's more courageous than I am. So I'm going to do 455 first, hopefully. I'm trying to practice what I preach or curl. Go ahead and put a quarter on there. Stan knows a lot of stuff. The Rhino knows a lot of stuff, but he gets very confused when you start using smaller plates. So he like the 25s and the 10s.
Yeah, I thought they were like door stops.
Yeah, he didn't know they could go on the end of the bar.
Coasters. I didn't know they were actually for lifting. I remember when I was a freshman in college, I went to the gym to lift with the rest of the guys, and they were warming up, and they had 135 on the bar, and one plate on each side. And I got under it, poof, I couldn't lift it.
Everybody probably thought you were kidding.
Everybody else was standing around looking at me. I was about $140, so it wasn't that big a deal. The bar was larger than my arms and legs, probably still is larger than my legs. So I had to take the 45s off and put the 35s on.
Oh,
I still remember that moment.
demoralizing.
It's one of those things.
But to get stronger, you had to stay in your lane, right?
Yeah.
You had to do the weights that you needed to do, right?
All those years of counseling, I still can't get rid of that memory.
You'll never be a success with that in your head. No matter what you do, no matter how many meals you sell. Didn't feel too bad. I can definitely do a little more. Whew. What are you doing sets-wise these days? You trying to hit it at like X amount of sets, or you're just getting to a weight and seeing how it feels and then going from there?
You know, I'm closely following all this volume research by Schoenfeld and Oregon
Knuckles and stuff.
Knuckles and those folks that. And the reason being is because I'm trying to find out how little I have to do.
Does their stuff fall in line with any of Prilipin's chart stuff where it's like, it always ends up being like 20 reps or so? Total?
No, they like, well, for hypertrophy, they like the mid-range, the 8 to 12, just because it's less fatigue than the 5s and the 20s. But just in terms of volume, they're starting to, the numbers keep coming down.
Right.
10 to 20 sets a week was kind of where they had the average, which is only 5 sets twice a week, right?
Right.
Per body part. So if you're doing chest, you do 5 sets of bench on Monday, 5 sets of bench on Friday. That's your 10 sets, and they're showing growth with that, with actually experienced lifters.
So 10 total sets, even spread out over other exercises.
10 total sets spread over the week. And now they just released another study where the 5 sets had the equivalent of 10, had the equivalent of 20. Maybe they outperformed the 20.
Well, you've heard,
So
you know.
now I'm like 5. That's all I got to do.
Well, guys like Dr. Mauro Di Pasquale, the anabolic diet guy.
Sure.
A legendary powerlifter as well. But him and a lot of other guys back then, they would do bench, squat, deadlift all in the same day.
Yeah.
And they would prioritize one lift and it would rotate. But supposedly they would only lift like once a week. They'd have another day a week where they'd come in and they'd do a little bit of like bodybuilding stuff, and that was it.
Yeah.
But
well,
they
this
did a
study
little
in
bit of what you're
particular
saying.
was only one training session a week.
Yeah.
They did 5 sets, and at the end of the, I don't want to say 10 weeks, but about the duration that it was, they had comparative results, and these weren't
Falls in
these
line
weren't
with
newbie
sprinting.
games.
It falls in line with sprinting and running. I mean, sprinting and jumping.
Yeah.
You don't have to do a lot of sprinting and jumping at a high intensity to get a great result.
Yeah, yeah. And then there's a lot of push for more volume, and maybe that's a progression over time. There's kind of been a pullback from the amount of fatigue that you create, the amount of muscle damage that you do.
Right.
That's probably not as necessary. That you could do fewer of those really damaging sets and then fill in with some more volume if you wanted to. Still within a rep or two of failure always, or you're not recruiting the, you know.
Well, when you trained with me, I mean, you did like, I would say maybe like 3 sets. Like you did one main set.
I was about to say.
But you did maybe about, we can say 3 sets that were kind of hard, you know.
And that was not consistent with the prevailing wisdom at the time,
No
which
assistance
was,
work either. You'd leave usually and go eat.
Yeah, but I've said it. If you just got done squatting 800 for a double, you know, going over and doing leg extensions probably isn't going to do much for you, for powerlifting, of course. But at the time was, I think there was a big push for the Bulgarian system and you know, training 5 days a week.
Right.
I think that was designed for Olympic lifters, though.
Yeah.
And they're doing stacking. They're probably not at 90% of 1 rep max, which is what we usually ran
Olympic
at.
lifting is so different.
So different. So I've always kind of been a less is more guy. That's why we squatted so infrequently and deadlifted so infrequently at those loads at my age.
Every other week it was kind of, right?
Yeah. So it's not that I'll paint with a broad brush and say everybody should do that little volume. But if you've reached a point at which you're using those heavy loads, you probably need to recover more.
I think everyone's so damn scared of being fat.
Yeah.
That they want to keep training all the time. Here we go, another good set. There you go, Stan. Nice. There you go. Good pace, yep, nice. There we go. Woo! Good set of 8, there we go.
That didn't feel terrible.
Not too shabby. This is a vertical diet versus the carnivore diet right here, right?
I did have carbs for breakfast, I will admit.
Judge it your own way. But we know what the results are going to be. Yikes.
Nice.
See if I can sneak one in sumo. Oh, I'm in a weird position. All right, I got in 1 rep. Woo! 500 pounds or 495 pounds.
Should have got those little coasters.
Yeah.
Put 'em on there.
What do you want to move into next?
You know, I like to do a chin-up movement
Yep.
when I do deadlifts. If I don't do it at a different workout, at least I try and finish with something like that.
If you're programming for somebody for powerlifting, is that what you would program as well, something like that?
Yeah, particularly with powerlifting, you don't get enough pulling movements.
Right.
You're doing all the bench pressing, the deadlifting.
Right.
So you got to keep, I don't do as many rows because of the lower back, but I do like the lat pull down or the chin up.
Got it. Whoops.
You're good.
I like to show people the trap bar a little bit, just with like a plate. I know you've been a big fan of it, and then I hear a lot of people talk about it, and I get a lot of questions. Just throw a plate on there. There we go. So why would somebody use a trap bar? What's the advantage of this thing?
Well, just with the elevated handles, you don't have quite as much an angle in the lower back. It's easier for, I think, an amateur lifter probably, although the counter argument would be that you would just have the amateur lifter lift lighter weights until
Or do box jumps or something.
they got the technique down.
Right.
I will say that, and I asked Rip, and I think he's one of the better people in terms of knowing the physics behind the movements. He's
Right.
really good at applying that as a, you know, a anthropologist and all. He's spent a lot of time working on calculating where you're, I think, in the best position to lift.
Right. And a lot of people think
Generating force.
they hear the way he teaches a squat, and a lot of times he's kind of teaching a forward lean in a squat. We're talking about Mark Ripito. And people get all up in arms about it, but the people that get up in arms about it have probably never taught anyone how to squat. Because most people can't squat like an Olympic lifter, where they're completely straight up and down. Like, you should be able to face a wall. You should be able to squat without leaning forward and touching the wall. Who can do it?
Right.
It's it's way more rare than you think. And so therefore, Mark Ripito teaches more of a powerlifting squat, out a little wider, and you're gonna kind of lean forward into it and kind of hip hinge while you're squatting.
Yeah. And part of that lower bar is just creating a shorter moment arm,
Yeah.
which puts you in a better position
Right.
to generate more force. But so I asked him, in all fairness, I told him when I work with NBA basketball players, I'll have them do a trap bar, probably even a higher handle than this, just because I don't want to position them in such a way. I do want to get them some loading. And he said one of his biggest concerns with that is with the deadlift, when you get to here, there's a stop point.
Yep.
With this movement here, when you get to here, there isn't.
All right.
And he doesn't want to see that happen. So you do have to maintain a tight core. There's certainly things that can go wrong with any lift. And here, he didn't want to see people doing that.
Right. And you see a lot of high school football players kind of swooping forward on their knees.
Yep.
Kind of.
You want to stay loaded. I always try and encourage people to keep the ass in the movement and not try and keep your hips underneath you.
Right, right.
And your knees forward. So a lot of times what folks will do is they'll try and break by arching the back. And you want to break by breaking at the hips. It's two different things.
Still keeping your stomach tight and your back neutral.
If you keep your stomach tight, you cannot arch your back.
Right.
And that's the thing is, first and foremost, is you get them to brace with their lower
flex your
back.
stomach.
Now when they go to break, they have to break here at the
You
hips.
guys got that? Like when you flex your stomach, when you crunch down on your stomach, then you can't, it's impossible. Once you're here,
You can't arch that
you
lower
can't-
back.
I can't arch, you know, without breaking this, right?
Yeah.
So cramp down on here and keep it that way.
And I see that a lot with squatters too. When sometimes the first thing they'll do is they'll arch their back and stick their butt out. The only way to do that is to relax the abdomen. So if you can get them to stay tight, you don't want to arch your back. You want to break at the hips. You want to push the glutes back so the glutes are tight in that position. So when I start this, I exaggerate it, but I break at the hips. I usually cue up, I kind of untrain the squat and the deadlift. I have them break here and stop. And now go down, and I get more compliance that way.
Right.
You should break kind of equally at the hips and knees, but if people, they tend to break more at the knees. Now their hips are underneath them, their glutes aren't loaded. So I'll break at the hips and stop. Then I can go down and grab the bar and press. It's a standing leg press. I'll even take athletes to the leg press and have them press a few times.
Yeah.
So I can get them to feel what it's like to engage here and to feel those quads hitting the abdominal. It should be that way in the whole of the movement.
The other thing with this bar is that, you know, when you have a deadlift bar and you walk up to the deadlift bar, the bar is in the way of your legs. And you heard Stan talk about how once you bend into position, that's about where your hips should be. Once you feel the coldness of the bar on your shins, now you know you're in a locked in position. But the issue is the weights are out in front of you, and if you're not strong, a lot of times the weights will start to go like this. As soon as you go to like pull off the ground here, you're here like this. As soon as you go to pull off the ground, the weights get out like this on you, and your arms come unraveled. And there's not a bench squat or deadlift where you don't want your lats to be flat, flexed, and there's no situation where you don't want the arms to be pulled in close to you. Bench squat and deadlift, you want them all to be the same. So when we go on here, we don't have anything in the way of our body. We don't have anything to shoot us forward. We don't have anything to pull us this way. So when you're on here, you're able to get in a good position and squat it up and use your legs more. Another thing I like about this one is that if you just put some weights underneath your heels, it becomes an idiot-proof squat as well. I don't know if you ever tried this before, Stan, but
Yeah, or an elevated. Stand on a block. It's a great squat.
So just get the heels up a little bit. And now we're going to try to squat. We still want to push the floor away from us, keep the tension on it. And I swear, you do this with 135 pounds or 185 and try to keep an upright posture and move slow, you'll be dying. You'll crush your legs. It's an idiot-proof squat. For those of you that train people, coach people, can't figure out a way to get them to squat, you can do it right there. We're going to move on to some pull-ups. What's up, Jess?
Morning, Jazz.
What's going on?
Hello.
How you be?
All right.
A little sweaty.
I learned a new thing. We have to hug on this side because then our hearts touch.
Oh.
Have you heard that one?
I haven't.
My training partner, Brittany, taught me that. She said, no, here, our hearts touch.
Our hearts.
Yeah. Leave it to Brittany.
See what we got going on here with some pull-ups.
You know, I really like with the pull-up, the one where you set the floor in such a way that you're stopped at the base. I like that. It seems to sometimes when I do chin-ups, maybe the next day I'll feel a little strain.
If you have to jump up to it, right?
That I didn't want to feel.
Right.
Yeah, at full stretch, of course, is when you're most exposed. So I like these. Didn't Poliquin originally introduce these? You just kind of, actually, you'll notice I have my feet on the ground. And I'll
We
pull
call them
and
fat girl pull-ups.
come down here. Yeah.
You're going to pull that whole rack down. What if that whole rack just landed right on his forehead? There you go. Nice work. Whoop, whoop. Do you care about grip? You do different grips?
I'm almost always doing the neutral now. I have a hard time doing
Yeah.
the forward or the reverse.
Just doing by what
Just lack of
feels
flexibility.
what feels best. Oh, I had my belt on, weighing me down. Next set, I'll be able to do 20 reps, no problem.
Weighted.
Oh, much better. How do you know, like, how did you know when you were training, like, when to stop, when you were going with certain weights and, like, form would come unglued, or even now if you're coaching or training somebody, like, somebody watching this, how would they know when they should stop going up in weight? Because it says X amount on their sheet
Yeah.
that they wrote down. They're supposed to do, you know, 300 pounds for 4 reps, and they just did 275 for 3, and there they are already rounding over. How do they know?
If it's a power lifter, then I'm really concerned about maintaining technique, because long term, there's no upside to
Right.
losing form. If it's a bodybuilder, then I'm concerned that they're recruiting muscles that they're not really intended to be working for that exercise.
Right.
And I'm the powerlifter guy who would get in the gym and do everything with momentum
Right.
and you know, recruit as many body parts as possible. And I had to learn, like when I trained with Flex, to focus just on the muscle group I'm working instead
Right.
of getting everything else involved. And that's a better outcome.
Did that help you a lot in powerlifting, you think? Because when you came to me, like, I only remember you missing like one lift. I remember like maybe like 1 or 2 occasions where your form was a little weird and we had to clean it up.
Yeah.
But that was about it out of, you know, a lot of training sessions.
Mostly it's just awareness. When you do that many different exercises for that many years, you can quickly get your body. As you know, a lot of the initial strength gain is neural adaptation for
Right.
most people. You get into an exercise that you maybe aren't familiar with or haven't done enough before,
Right.
and your body just learns to fire and recruit all the muscles necessary to perform that task.
Right.
So for the first 4, maybe 6 weeks for some people, they'll have extraordinary gains in strength, but it's all neural adaptation. It's not necessarily relative to
Right.
to muscle cross-sectional areas.
A really good example of that would be something like a floor press. Like, if you've never tried a floor press before, week 1 you'll do some weight and it won't be very heavy.
Things will be
And there
awkward.
it is, week 2 or 3, you're already lifting more weight. And it's not really because you got stronger, it's because you got adapted to
or
it.
that you increase muscle size.
Right.
That wasn't the
Yeah, it's
the
not gonna
cause
happen
of
in
the
that
strength
short
gain.
period, yeah.
Right.
This is what old guys do in the gym, by the way.
They talk for 10 minutes between sets.
$52, Stan, or 53? Or did you lose track?
See, you call my totals low, I correct you high. You call my age high, I correct you low. 51.
51, all
Yeah,
right.
I got a couple months before I'll be 52.
So in 9 years, I'm going to look like him.
You can never get this ugly.
Any little tricks on getting better at a pull-up?
Pull-ups. You just got to
Just keep
practice
working on them. Even if you can't do one, you just try to
band.
hang and hold.
I would just hang a band
Some
over
bands.
here and put your knee in it
Yep.
and start using an assisted pull. I'll warm up that way most of the time. Because my old
Get
body,
your biceps ready and
if I
everything.
jump right into a
Yeah.
chin up, it pulls on you pretty hard. Sometimes I want to exercise. I want to get my heart rate up.
Right.
It's inconsistent with the hypertrophy stimulus. So this isn't the place to do it if that's your goal,
Right.
is to get your heart rate up, unless you superset. So sometimes I'll do a set of dips and I'll only rest 30 seconds, do a set of chins, rest 30 seconds. Then I've gotten about 90 seconds to 2 minutes between each set of chins, which is optimal for hypertrophy.
Right.
I start getting down to 30-second rests between sets of the same body part, and it's more muscular endurance and not hypertrophy training.
Right.
So I'm cautious that I get the intended result for what I'm trying to do. And I'm still trying to, hypertrophy train.
Right.
So,
Gets to be confusing too, because more work in less time can help you get bigger too. But you need to recover from each set properly in order to get the rep range that you're looking for. I've heard a strength coach before say it's strength and conditioning. They're separate from each other. It's not strength plus conditioning. If you can't work strength and conditioning literally at the same time, they have to be done a little differently.
unless you're CrossFit.
Right.
And that's the demand of your sport.
Right.
But I said CrossFit before, they're good at a lot of things,
right.
but they're not great at any one thing like a decathlete would be in track. They're not winning the 100-meter dash. They're not winning the pole vault. They're not winning the javelin. But they're, they have to do all of them.
And they're really smart too. I mean, they go to a lot of professional coaches. They go to a lot of track coaches. So like if they're trying to increase their, 400-meter or their 100-meter time or whatever they're trying to increase, they'll just adhere to whatever that sport does for a little while. So they might back off of some sets and some reps of some Metcons and maybe focus more in on their weightlifting with a good weightlifting coach. Doesn't take a lot of pull-ups to wear you out, right?
Yeah, 3 sets. And the idea is there not to do a whole lot of wasted work. You go to within a rep or 2 of failure, or even 2 failure. It's not a big deal on chin-ups necessarily. Push off with your foot.
You know a lot more now, and you're able to apply a lot to it. But do you think you could have ever developed that body without overtraining?
I could have done better sooner.
Right.
Do
you think some of it was some of it was necessary?
I think you got to take
your back is massive, right? So it's like
I definitely think you have to continue to take your body somewhere it hasn't been before. There does have to be a progression over time.
Right.
Progression can be obtained from a variety of different ways: volume, load, frequency. It's a host of different variables that you can manipulate. Whether it's the 5-rep range, the 20-rep range, or the 10 to 12, all of them work, and probably work better when they're used collectively, whether it's done within a given workout, over the course of a week, a heavy light. And when I say light, I still mean within a rep of failure, but 50-60% load as opposed to 85. Or over the course of some subsequent mesocycles where you do 6 weeks of bodybuilding, 6 weeks of powerlifting. So that was the biggest advantage I think for me, was that I did a powerlifting meet, then I dieted down to a bodybuilding show. I think it was good for my health because sometimes when I was doing powerlifting, I'd suffer from metabolic syndrome. I had, high blood sugars and all the fat and all that stuff.
All bloated.
And then when you diet down and do bodybuilding, of course, a lot of those things remedy themselves. Plus your joints get a rest, assuming that you're cautious with, when you're bodybuilding, not to start, over stressing the joints. Things like skull crushers. I still get feedback from people. Oh, my elbows hurt. I did some skull crushers. What can I do? Eliminate skull crushers. There's certain things that you avoid that are just predispose you, I think.
Yeah. Are there other ways to build up your triceps? Sure, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. So I guess generally speaking, there has to be a progression, but you've got to be smart about how you do that. And I think there does have to be some variation in your training. If you do the same thing all the time, you're not going to respond.
Right.
Yeah. That might be all I do. In going back to Greg Knuckles' recent meta-analysis of volume, is we did about 6 sets.
Do you work out sometimes multiple times a day?
Yes, I love, for hypertrophy training in particular, that's what I have all my athletes do. I'm working with Nadia Wyatt, who took 3rd in the Olympia last year, a figure competitor.
Right.
And instead of doing the cardio, we do 2-a-day training. People talk a lot about how when you eat adequate amount of protein that has adequate amount of leucine, it stimulates muscle protein synthesis. Well, it pales in comparison to the training stimulus in terms of increasing muscle protein synthesis. So I replicate the training stimulus as much as possible.
Right.
So I get all those hormones released. I get that huge window, which
even if a workout's 15 minutes, it's still, right? It's still something.
Yeah. You eat a meal, you might get elevated muscle protein synthesis for, let's say, 3 hours.
Right.
You do a workout, that could be 48 to 96 hours.
Wow.
So the training stimulus, to me, there has to be some, I think, the frequency's huge. With Flex, we train twice a day. And it wasn't hour-and-a-half workouts. It was like 40 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes at night.
But he did kill you though, right?
We went pretty hard, but it wasn't heavy. It was a decent amount of volume, but again, you can train long or you can train hard, but you can't do both. And so we did a 40-minute workout in the morning and a 30-minute workout at night. And then we pushed a lot of calories at that. And our body, because of the stimulus, then your body can start to utilize those calories. If I was only training 3 days a week and trying to eat the same number of calories, I don't think I'd have anywhere near the same result.
It's basically like sticking all the nutrients in all the right spots, right?
Exactly, yeah. The
By
partition.
training like that.
Yeah.
Did you guys do cardio too or no?
None. Zero. Yeah. We create the deficit with the workload from the training. Right. The 2 workouts a day had plenty to create a deficit. Besides that, you know, we can talk more about that today as well.
Well, that's a huge advantage because like, and each coach has different ways of doing things, but I did like 90 minutes of cardio. Plus, you got to keep in mind, I was in a really short window. I only prepped for like 8 or 9 weeks. And so I think traditionally people would like to have double that amount of time or so. But it's like 90 minutes of cardio. What could I have otherwise been doing with my time? I could have been sleeping, right? And then would the sleep have promoted better gains? Probably yes.
Yeah, some good research to that.
Right.
Let's talk about that in the seminar tomorrow.
It's always awesome to have you here. It's always great to have you here.
Yeah.
You know, you set world records inside a SuperTraining gym. There's been a lot of fun things that have happened with our relationship over the years. Can I get a hey now? And last time I think you came here, you might have been with Mr. Open Up Your Taint, Mr. Ed Cohn.
Yeah.
And we've had a lot of good times together. And I've learned a lot from this guy, watching him, you know, break all-time world records, watching him get a bodybuilding pro card, and then watching the growth that he had in his original business and that he now has in the business that he has now with the vertical diet. If you guys haven't seen stuff about the vertical diet, you're really missing out. You're like living under a rock. You're not paying attention. Stan is one of the few guys, he's promoting many different things, but I would say that he's one of the few guys that's promoting to really blast yourself with a lot of nutrients and a lot of nutrition. Where most coaches are trying to take away, it seems like he's trying to add. He's trying to add food. He's trying to add, because a lot of people out there, I think, a lot of people are under eating. So a lot of the benefits of the vertical diet would pertain to all you guys, whether you want to get shredded and lean down or whether you want to get bigger for powerlifting or bodybuilding, whatever it is. Stan, give us a little information about the vertical diet and where people can find it.
Yeah, you can find it at theverticaldiet.com or at stanefferding.com. And what I've tried to do throughout my career, I've dieted down to probably 4 or 5% body fat to compete in bodybuilding, and I've bulked up to well over 300 pounds to compete in powerlifting. And I had to utilize and manipulate nutrition on both ends. And so I'm very familiar with what works and what doesn't work, and I've seen a lot of the adverse effects on both ends. And so I've tried to design this diet to short circuit or overcome some of those problems that people have. The nutrient deficient diets that cause, manifest themselves in things, particularly in women, like anemia and hair loss and amenorrhea. And in men, things like fatty liver disease and high cholesterol and blood pressure, etc. So I've tried to design a diet and a program that addresses those concerns on both ends because, as I said in my video, if you want to be healthy, don't compete. And so really behind the scenes, I'm just trying to mitigate damage and put people in a position so that their body starts to work for them, so it's optimal, so they don't suffer from a lot of those ailments that people suffer from, putting themselves in the position that they're putting themselves in. So the vertical diet is about health first. It's about digestion first. It's about micronutrient dense, easy to absorb, highly bioavailable foods. And I build this foundation, and then on top of that foundation, we can build a skyscraper that is consistent with anybody's workload or body size or what have you. So.
One of the best things I think that he shares is he says all the time, and he'll repeat it a bunch when we do this seminar tomorrow, is he says, I didn't make any of this up. Like yes, he created the name, the vertical diet, but he didn't make any of this up. This is all just from research and stuff that he's tried, stuff that's worked for him, stuff that hasn't worked for him, and research that has come across his table. So I really love that part of it, because a lot of the guys are like, hey, this is my, they made up something and it's confusing and people don't know how to follow it. Your thing is very straightforward. Eat a lot of meat and rice and bone broth and you're halfway there.
Yeah, get those micronutrients in, that's for sure. So, whew.
Strength is never weakness, weakness is never strength. Catch you guys later.